There I am. Hey, all right. Welcome to another Thursday night blather. Once again, this week it's story time. I am not going to get into politics today. There's nothing really going on in the world right now. It's pretty boring, isn't it? If you watched last week, it was 50 years ago last Thursday that I arrived in Dannemora. It's Clinton State Penitentiary, maximum security for orientation, classification, and all that good stuff. And this week, I'm going to talk about what that first week was like in there. And a lot of this is written. A lot of it's written. So I'm going to read. I'll pause and I'll comment. Hey, my birthday's tomorrow, and so I'm going to be 72 tomorrow. But 50 years ago, I turned 22. Yeah, so yeah, I turned 22 in prison. You know that whole thing. So I'm going to talk about that. That's an unwritten story because I owe somebody a debt of gratitude that I'm having a hard time figuring out how to repay. We'll get to that. But first, I'm going to kind of continue the story. If you remember last week, and the links for all of the previous chapters. This is chapter 5. And the links for all 4 previous chapters are in the description of this video. So I'm going to pick up kind of right where I left off. And if you remember last week, I told the story about the one and only cigarette I've ever smoked in my life. So this story is kind of a preamble to all the writing that I did when I was locked up. This is a true story. I once picked up a hitchhiker on my way back to college near one of the toll booths on the New York State Thruway. He was wearing a Navy uniform. My father was in the Navy in World War II, and he taught me to always pick up hitchhikers wearing military uniforms, especially Navy. Times were different, I suppose. You don't want to pick up hitchhikers these days, do you? The hitchhiker had some deep convictions regarding America's involvement in the war in Vietnam and had gone AWOL a few days earlier, shortly after his return from a tour of duty over there. We got to talking, and we talked about the trouble he was most likely knee-deep in. I asked him what he was going to do next. He said he didn't know. Maybe Canada, maybe turn himself in. He just needed some time to think. His voice trailed off several times during the conversation, but he said one thing that I've never forgotten regarding the possibility of spending time in the brig. I asked him how he dealt with the prospect of being locked up and it costing him years out of his life. He replied in these exact words: "If I have to go to prison, I will not look at it as years out of my life. I would look at it as years of my life." Here's so we leave with the one guy yelling out about somebody having a motherfucking heart attack. Again, this is what comes next. So this is still March 12th, 1976, the day that I arrived at maximum security Clinton State Prison in Dannemora, New York. Slowly, the uncontrollable coughing was replaced by uncontrollable laughter. I'm sure it sounded quite unique during the height of this transition, and the laughter enveloped me and took over and soon had nothing to do with the words I just heard. And I lost my identity again in the bizarre release of emotions that got me labeled as the buggy guy in cell 440. The loud laughter was slowly replaced by tears. I kept the tears silent. I knew enough to know that I should not show weakness, not here, maybe not ever again. I knew right then that I would never smoke another cigarette, but I also knew that I had to finish this one I had started. Had to finish the one I had started. It was like, if I wanted this to be the only cigarette, the only prison sentence I ever did, then I had to finish the cigarette. Otherwise, there'd be another one waiting for me in another cell somewhere in the future. Sounds stupid. Yeah, it actually does sound stupid in retrospect. But I took the notion very seriously at the time, so I smoked the rest of it, and I coughed and laughed and cried through the whole thing. I'd been awake since 5:30 a.m., and the nap returned to the front of the line. The blanket was truly repulsive, but it was all I had. You may remember from last week, if you watched, the blanket they gave me had a basketball-sized blood stain on it, which was not exactly a welcome mat. The blanket was truly repulsive, but it was all I had. It was already wrapped around me to keep me warm. I had not been issued any uniforms yet, and the extra clothes I had in county jail had all been taken from me, so all I had to wear were the clothes on my back. I laid down. Using the blanket as a pillow was out of the question. It was way too cold. I covered myself, taking care to put the blood stain as far away from my face as possible. I really wanted to sleep. I wanted to sleep away the entire next year. I just wanted time to move forward as fast as possible. Sleep would certainly help that process along, but it was still very cold and very noisy. I tried wrapping part of the blanket around my head, both to stifle some of the noise and be a very thin pillow. Useless act of futility. All it did was cause my lower body to be uncovered and therefore cold. Then a thought occurred to me. As it turns out, I suppose one could call it an epiphany of sorts. Maybe I was approaching this all wrong. Maybe my time here could be actually put to good use. The only items in the cell I still had not touched were the pencil and paper. I could write. Not just doodle, not write a letter. I could really write. I had a story that needed telling. I could write the story about a 17-year-old high school senior who has an after-school job in the public library. How he goes to college having never done a drug and never having had an alcoholic drink. How he tries pot in his freshman year. How he tries LSD in his sophomore year. How he gets in gambling trouble and begins to deal pot and LSD to pay his debts. How he meets a girl and falls in love with her. Or how the heartbreak he feels when things don't work out sets him off on a path of heavy gambling, dealing, and prescription drug abuse. How he's ultimately arrested just before graduation and sent to a state prison, and the yet to unfold story about how he survives prison. Writing the story would make this whole ordeal make sense. Now I understood what that hitchhiking Navy AWOL guy was talking about. By spending my time writing, I could transform my time in prison from time out of my life to time of my life. Then it would all make sense. As I began to doze off, I was actually aware that I had found a new sense of purpose. Pencil and paper would help make the most of this experience. This experience. That's what this was going to be, an experience, a chapter of my life, a place to tell my story and a place to tell stories about things yet to come. As sleep began to envelop me, I wondered. Canoga Park, California, ? March 12, 1976. When I woke up from my nap, I found myself reclining in a chair next to the swimming pool at my sister's apartment house. That was one really nasty dream I'd just woken up from. I thought about jumping in the pool to wash it out of my brain. It seemed too real. Busted for drugs, going to prison, terrified in anticipation of the months, or was it years to come? But it was all a dream. The freezing cold, the blood-soaked blankets, the guards, the judge, the mandatory 1 year to life sentence, such detail, all gone, all gone. The prison bars replaced by palm trees. It was a horrible dream, but a good one to wake up from and contemplate. And sitting poolside in my sister's Canoga Park, California apartment complex was a great place to have woken up from it. So in a matter of seconds, I'd gone from prison bars and terror to bright sunshine and palm trees. Life was clearly on the upswing. Could things possibly get any better? I woke up before I opened my eyes. I was laying down. I kept my eyes closed. I felt cold. I was pretty sure I was alone. I kept my eyes closed. I remembered the bad dream. I squeezed my eyelids shut tight. I realized that I didn't have a pillow under my head. Where was I? Where was I? I didn't want to open my eyes and find out. Two possibilities, two very different possibilities. I felt cold. I heard shouting. I didn't have a pillow under my head. I didn't have to open my eyes. I knew. But I kept them shut for just a few more seconds anyway, just to hang on to the possibility. That was really cruel. It really was. It really was. Spoiler alert, I really was locked up, and the Canoga Park thing was a dream, not the other way around. I'm going to skip ahead to a year later. The Grateful Dead movie opened at the Ziegfeld in New York City, and there was one little scene in there that really freaked me out. Again, keep in mind the story I just told you, and let's just see this.
Son of a gun, better change your act. I'm confused. What's
So when I saw that scene, um, it really blew my mind. That's exactly what happened. I'm laying there thinking I'm in paradise, and I wake up locked up. Terrible, terrible thing. So the next day, and this is also a written story. The very next day, so that that all that happened on March 12th. March 13th, I'm going to read another story. This was written on December 21st, 2005, which you may realize is the week before Christmas. It's got a little bit of a long intro, but we get right back into Dannemora in this. I have a pretty long last name, 11 letters. It caused me trouble on my first day of first grade. My teacher made name cards for all of us and put them on our desks. My last name was spelled incorrectly. I raised my hand and politely told my teacher she had misspelled my last name. Well, I'm pretty sure I was polite. I was 6 years old, and it's quite possible my definition of polite was different back in those days. In any case, she got angry and defensive and was sure she had it right and I had it wrong. And she made sure the whole class knew that she had it right and I had it wrong. But the fact was that even though I was only 6 years old, I damn well knew how to spell my own name. So in point of fact, she may have thought she had it right and I had it wrong. But in reality, I had it right and she had it wrong. Please forgive my annoying use of repetitive phraseology this morning. I'm currently at my desk. Today's the day my employees are having their Christmas potluck, and somebody brought chocolates filled with Jack Daniels. Normally, I would honor my solemn vow to never drink and type, but today I think I'm onto something with this name business, so kindly bear with me. Plus, I didn't really drink. I just ate some chocolate. I'm also trying to work on my bad habit of digressing into oblivion every time a random thought pops into my head in the middle of writing something. So let me get back to the point, whatever that was. Oh yeah, my name. 7 letters in my first name, 11 letters in my last name. Not to mention, I weighed 7 pounds, 11 ounces at birth. Talk about predisposition. I might as well have been born with a pair of dice in my hands. Names, back to the point. After my parents straightened out everything with Miss Sherry, my first grade teacher, my name card was altered to add an E in front of the I, and the name Michael Ungerleider was there, correctly spelled for all to see. It didn't take long for my last name to become a subject of teasing and taunting, and more benignly a seemingly endless resource of nicknames, some more annoying than others, like Mungo, Ungus the Fungus, Unga Bunga Boo, etc. It stayed pretty much that way from first grade through senior year of college. I got used to it. Anyway, it's a long story, but a few years after my graduation and release from Dannemora, I started driving a taxi cab in New York City. My name, all 18 letters of it, plus my middle initial, was on display on the dashboard and was an open invitation for commentary. Not mean-spirited commentary like I used to get in the schoolyard. Mostly people would see my name and decide to share their spontaneous linguistic expertise with me. I got a lot of interpretations. I heard second lieutenant. I heard the hungry sufferer. I even heard cow thief. Yes, cow thief was my favorite. My favorite moment, though, that involved my name being on display on the dashboard was the following exchange. This is a true story. This is really a true story. This guy gets in the back of my cab and tells me where he'd like me to take him. A few minutes later, he breaks the silence and says, "Hey, you have a pretty long last name." So I said, "Yeah, I guess." And he said, "Your last name is longer than mine." And I said, "Yeah, I guess." And he said, "I guess that means I owe you a quarter." And I said, something like, but not exactly, "Yeah, I guess." And he reaches into his pocket and hands me a quarter. I was thrilled. I was finally being properly compensated for all the years of teasing and taunting by the other kids and for the humiliation of having my parents called out on my first day of first grade. Okay, let's get back to the friendly confines of Dannemora. March 13th, 1976, Dannemora, New York. You know what? I think I want to be partly on screen for this. Story's called Names. I was told upon my arrival the day before at the Clinton State Penitentiary in Dannemora that my name from now on would be 76D47. I've seen enough prison movies to realize just how corny it was for them to say that to me. But I just listened politely. It didn't bother me, actually. For one thing, I had way bigger problems than what my name was. And for another thing, I felt that 76D47 had a certain ring to it. Being Michael Stephen Ungerleider hadn't worked out so well. After all, I ended up in Dannemora after almost 22 years of walking around with a name that might very well mean Michael S. Cowthief. So 76D47 was worth a whirl. Plus, unlike Ungerleider, 76D47 had a very concise and easy to interpret meaning. It meant that I was the 47th prisoner in 1976 to be processed in Dannemora. Gary Decker, who you may recall was in the car with me when they drove us to state prison, Gary Decker was a few cells over from me. He was kind enough to give me a notebook to do some writing in. He was now called 76D45. It didn't take me long to familiarize myself with my new handle. But then something very confusing happened on my second day there. I had a visitor from a group called Prisoners' Rights Society. Michael Fite, my attorney, in what I'm sure was a well-meaning gesture, arranged for them to come see me. I wasn't particularly interested in my rights at the time. I just wanted to get out. So I don't really recall anything of practical value coming out of the meeting. But I do remember the aftermath of it. Oh boy. Apparently, the guards were not particularly big fans of the Prisoners' Rights Society, as I would soon find out. Okay, so I'm going to pause there because I need to play just a few seconds from last week as preamble. So they took me to the barbershop and cut my hair, and they cut my hair. I didn't have hair that short since I was a 12-year-old Boy Scout, I'm telling you right now. Yeah. So yeah, they gave me a haircut the day that I got there. So now let me get back to the story. When I was returned to H block, 4th tier, where I occupied the 40th cell, I sat on a chair at the end of the tier waiting for the guards to open the gate and allow me to return to my cell. While I was waiting, a guard walked by. He was staring at me, so I stared back at him. It was just a natural reaction, not a purposeful act of defiance. He says to me, "Hey, prisoners' rights, stand up." So I stood up. Then he asks, "What's your name?" I was ready for the answer. At least I thought I was ready for the answer. 76D47, I replied. "No," he said. "What cell are you in?" I said, 40. "And what cell block is this?" H block. "And what tier are we on?" 4th tier. "Okay, H440, go get a haircut." Now, as you know, I had a haircut the day before, and my hair hadn't been this short since I was 12. Forget about it. I couldn't believe this guy was not even letting me use the name that was given to me when they took Ungerleider away. And I really couldn't believe he was asking me to get a haircut. They had just cut my hair really short the day before. My hair had not been this short since I was 12. See, I'm consistent. That's the story. It had not been this short since I was 12. In a moment of misbegotten logical thinking, I said, "I just got a haircut yesterday." That was the answer he was looking for. He pulled his club from his belt, tapped his opposite palm with it, and walked uncomfortably close to me. "What did you just say to me?" It was one of those questions he clearly already knew the answer to. And I knew that no matter what I said, I would just get further into trouble. So I said nothing. And he got right up in my face and looked into my eyes. And then I guessed right, because instead of looking back at him, I turned my gaze to the floor and hugged my head slightly. And he said, "Now listen up, H440. You get your ass to the barber right now. You are one word away from keep block." And when he said keep, he slapped his palm with his club. So I went to the prison barber and got another haircut. And afterwards, I returned to my cell, this time without incident, wrote my name in the notebook that Gary Decker, aka 76D45, had given to me, and began to tell my story. So that's how the week started out. I smoked the one and only cigarette I ever smoked in my life. I had a dream that my entire legal problem was a dream, and I got 2 haircuts in 2 days. It was unbelievable. Well, the week went by without much further incident. I just kind of laid in the cell. Went to whatever interviews I had to go to, and went out in the yard, and I learned about the hierarchy in the yard, places you dare not go, and 20. I was locked in my cell 20 hours a day, sometimes 21 hours a day. So, but they showed movies sometimes, and they let us go to the movies. So on my birthday, on my 22nd birthday, on March 20th, 1976, I was in the room with all the guys watching a movie. The movie was actually The Laughing Policeman with Walter Matthau. And it was a pretty intense, violent movie, and I was kind of caught up in it. And then in the lower left-hand corner of the movie screen, I saw 76D47. That was my number. Bingo! That meant I had a visitor. I wasn't expecting anybody. But if you saw your name on the screen, you stand up and the guard comes and escorts you to the visiting room. So, preamble to this, I had a roommate for a semester in college, Ted Liban. And we just really didn't get along. We ended up swapping out. Charles. We had a suite, 3 bedrooms. There were 3 bedrooms, 2 guys in each room, so it was 6 people to a suite. We all shared a little study area. And Charlie had a roommate he wasn't liking, and I had a roommate I wasn't liking, so we switched out. Ted was our roommate, and I traded Ted for Charlie, which at the time I was very happy. I'm still happy about it. Charlie's great. We're friends to this day. But Ted, in spite of me not being particularly nice to him, and in spite of trading him for a different roommate, showed up on my birthday at the maximum security facility visiting room. Who knows what he had to go through just to get to see me. And he brought me a cheesecake. Not just a cheesecake. He brought me a Gateway Diner cheesecake. Oh, Gateway Diner was the Juniors of Albany, or it was anyway. I'm not sure if they're still around now. Again, this was 1976. But what an act of kindness that was by Ted. What an act of kindness. And it occurred to me a few years ago that, man, I want to thank him. So, I checked Google, I checked Facebook, I checked this, I checked that. No trace of him. Now with AI, I asked AI. AI said there's no record of his death. Well, that's good. Hopefully he's still alive. But there's no sign of life either. I talked to a mutual friend. He hadn't heard from him in decades. I hope he's still alive. And if he is still alive, and if anybody by some miracle knows Ted Liban, here's the only thing I was able to find out about Ted. Good for Ted. Ted became a lawyer. Not only became a lawyer, but if I'm not mistaken, he became a lawyer in Spring Valley, California. But this is definitely him. The birth date's about right, 1953, from Queens. Although when I met him, he was from Huntington, Long Island, State University of Albany, et cetera, et cetera. So unfortunately, I don't see anything after 1988 in this resume, but I would just love to find Ted Liban and thank him for that amazingly selfless act of bringing me a Gateway Diner cheesecake on my birthday, on my 22nd birthday, in the maximum security facility in Dannemora, New York. That's about it right now. And I know that's Stephanie watching, by the way, and that's very cool that she's watching. Very rare to get her live. Very rare to get her on the live stream. I like it. Um, and I'm grateful because she's encouraged me to tell these stories and give, and not just encourage me, but give me the courage to tell them publicly. So let's hear it for the muse. But that's about it right now. Now, I'm going to be down for a couple of weeks. I'm not going to. I might be able to squeeze in something next week, but I'm kind of indisposed for a while. I'll definitely be back with more stories 3 weeks from tonight. But if I could find a way of doing it, I will do a blathercast and tell more of these stories, or maybe talk about current events in between all the prison stories. I don't know. And that's about it for now. That is about it for now. Nothing else to report on that first week. So I'll just say the words. The boomer has blathered. Thank you so much for watching.